Sí.
Es cuando veo entiendo tu estilo.
¿Entiende qué?
Entiendo tu estilo, ¿sabes que no?
Bueno.
Saber más de tu pintura.
Sí.
Pero no lo venden ni nada.
Sí, a ti te lo vendo por $4.
Sí, una larga.
No sé si... no tengo. No tengo. Sí, yo tengo un catálogo aquí, pero ya no sé si son bien.
¿Estas son todos los vas a llevar a venderlos allá o...?
Sí.
Porque yo creo que varios de aquí yo los he visto antes.
Bueno, sí, en la exhibición.
No, por eso yo no fui a esa. Yo no
Ahí
sé
estaba
dónde
en
yo
la
lo he
bóveda.
visto. No, porque hay un aquí en Panamá.
Sí, ¿te parece qué posición?
Esta es la que me mandé a Japón, pero no está terminada todavía. ¿La puedes ver? Solamente. You know, because if I look at my father's side of the family, my grandmother and a lot of aunts used to paint, not professionally, but they were good. They had talent. They did a lot of paintings in their lifetime and express themselves artistically, whether in painting or in other forms. You know, doing dresses or in sewing or doing costumes for carnival or just in their life. You know, you can tell when somebody's artistic even from the way they cook. So from my father's side, there was a lot of this, and my mother was also artistic. She had talent, but she never developed it. You know, I could tell because she did some paintings when she was young. So I think there's that influence, whether it be environmental or passed, you know, through my knowing these people, or genetically. I really don't have a way of telling.
They were very supportive.
They were supportive, yeah. And so when I was young, my mother used to get me some paints, and I used to paint, and but never really did it seriously, and never really did it with a lot of focus, or consistently, or with the knowledge that I was gonna develop it into anything. As I grew up, when I was, you know, in my teens, my late teens, I would find that I had this necessity to do a few works, a few paintings or drawings at one particular point in my life. Like every year I would do maybe 3 paintings, but it came out of this urge to do it, sort of something that I would interpret as an inspiration. I never thought of developing it. My father was very traditional, conservative, and he wanted me to go into a career, university, something more solid and structured, and so I went to study law. So I did 2.5 years, and then I had an accident, a motorcycle accident. I landed in the hospital, and that gave me time for the first time. This is when I was about 20. It gave me time to think about what I was doing, and I realized that no way that I wanted to become a lawyer. I wanted something where I could be creative, and so then I decided, well, what I have to do is study architecture, and that way I can express myself artistically and still have a honorable career in my father's eyes and society's eyes. So I did my architecture. I became an architect, and I worked as an architect for about 3 years. But this painting thing still hung there, and I decided at that point that I would stop doing all my architecture work and paint. Try to get one show and do one show and get that out of my system, and then continue with my architecture. So I finished all the work I was doing in architecture. Found a gallery that would show my work, and then started working. So I worked that whole year towards the exhibit, and had my exhibit, liked the experience so much, and found that that's where I wanted to grow, and learning how to paint well, and expressing myself that way. So at that point I went to school in New York at the Art Students League, and spent 9 months there learning to paint. Came back a few years, and I went back for about a year and a half to the same school, and then came back to Panama. And I've been painting professionally, since I quit my architecture. It's been about 11 years now that I've been doing it consistently. Sí, ese es un corazón que está agarrando, que lo está presionando así contra el pecho del hombre.
¿Qué combina la fragilidad de la mano a la mano?
¿En la exposición está aquí en Panamá?
Sí.
¿No vendiste que
No estaban vendiendo los
no los estaban vendiendo.
No.
Era nada más exposición.
At the beginning, when I started painting 11 years ago, I guess it was more academic what I was doing. I was learning a technique, and I wasn't, that much into the art, so I didn't really know that much about painting and contemporary artists, Latin American artists. So I didn't have that influence. The influence I had was what had moved me, and it was more the Renaissance art. So my first paintings were these girls that looked ethereal, and they were very beautiful and youthful, and I guess looking back on it is sort of asking for acceptance also in the paintings, doing something that would be more not universal, but more cosmopolitan, yeah. So I was in New York, and I was doing these models and doing these paintings that didn't have really anything to say about Panama. And also I started having this need to come here and be closer to Panama, the people, and have my painting experience come here, which I really had not had yet, with all this new knowledge that I had with painting and technique and new meanings in developing ideas. So coming to Panama put me more in contact with my people, and so slowly the painting started to say more about this, and more about my experiences in my life, throughout my life, my youth and my adult life, and my environment. So that's why you see now more of something that more the people in my paintings are more the people who I can relate to, and who I have contact with here.
Kind of thing there.
Well, I like to get religion. Somehow religion comes into my paintings, and it comes in a way that I'm not quite sure what my real intentions are, and I've tried to look into the less possible. So the Saint Sebastian was probably because I've had a lot of exposure to art and Renaissance art where Saint Sebastian was portrayed, and so it was a time when I was going through a lot of problems, and feeling down and not having the best of times, and so that suffering I wanted to sort of exorcise myself, and I thought of Saint Sebastian. And then I didn't want to do just a plain old Saint Sebastian, so I did a woman figure, being having the suffering, my suffering. But it was an instrument. Saint Sebastian was there, so I utilized it. And so I put these arrows into this woman, and it was very strong because there were arrows going into her groin area, and it's a lot of very intense. People who saw it were kind of shocked by it, and as time went by, I left it alone. As time went by, I was shocked myself with it. I thought it was too much, you know, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel peace in looking at it. So I took the arrows out, and it turned, you know, some of the arrows remained in the background, but then her hair sort of grew, and these rays of light, to me they're like rays of light coming out of, or flames of fire coming out of her hair. And I used gold leaf for that. But and then it was a time when Panama was going through a lot of trouble, the crisis here, and to me, all of a sudden I got better emotionally, but I was still working on the painting. So actually the Saint Sebastian, this woman, became Panama to me. And so I saw her, and the people, the angels that surrounded her, the people that I did around her, to me were the people, the government of Panama, the people sort of abusing or letting this person suffer, and they were drinking wine and having a good time conversing around her, not really caring or paying attention to her suffering. Why the religious thing? I told you before that I don't know, you know.
Everything is cultural.
It's cultural, yeah. It's, you know, I was brought up with a Catholic religion, and it was here in Latin America. You're really, you know, like hammered in that in school and by your parents and the church, and a lot of that I think I've got in me from childhood. I'm sort of letting it out, and it's very much alive. There's several things working there. One is that my own personal upbringing was not totally Latin American. In Panama, we're very our culture is very influenced by other cultures because of the type of society we have here, and especially United States culture is very embedded in Panama. So also my mother is from the United States, so I have, you know, a lot of that. The woman in religious paintings, the woman is the Virgin, and the Virgin is very much portrayed in religion, and so when you think of a religious image, I think here you first think of the Virgin of Guadalupe and the Virgin of Carmen, and I mean, there's a Virgin for everything in Panama. Every town has a patron saint, and it usually is a woman. Well, not really, it's men and women, but it's I would say the Virgin stands alone in one category. If one figure had to stand out, it would be the woman. And then I personally like to paint the woman figure. Right. But here, what you see is that they're having sort of a relaxed, easy time, and they're conversing, and they're drinking wine, and they're sort of having a picnic. While she's submerged in her suffering, and so it's that lack of interest, that total apathy of what's going on with her, with them, that I saw a relationship there with Panama, and also with women, you know, with women, how they're in society, they're fighting for equality, and especially, like you say, here in Latin America, there are things some clippings that I sort of cut out from the newspapers that I like, the faces of some people, and others are photographs that I took people around here, and postcards I pick up different places, flowers I used to have, hats. That was done shortly after, you know, the invasion. I was really shocked by it, as anybody would be, and I was doing this large painting, and so I started trying to portray the violence of the fire, letting loose in my technique, which normally is a little smoother, and the freedom of the brushstroke and all that. And I was trying to feel that violence and letting it go, being just the violence of the whole thing. You know, I mean, we were just looking at it. Naturally, we wanted to be closer than what I got. You know, I think the people who did get closer were the unfortunate people, you know, that were caught in it. But to me, that violence, that this painting cannot justify it. And when I look at it now, you know, I look at it and say I shouldn't have even tried, because it was so intense, so horrible. Just to see one part of town in fire, you know, and being bombed all the time, and to try to portray that in a canvas, you feel like, boy, I didn't do it any justice. But at that moment, I just felt that I had that experience so vivid in me that I wanted to put it down. If any time I could, it would be then. Well, after I expressed myself freely and violently on the canvas, and I stood back, I let some of my surrealism and religious sort of connotation to life here come into the painting, and so you can see this figure coming out from the canvas through a hole, and to me it's almost like a religious figure, but portrayed in here in our human world, in that this person who comes out is, to me, responsible for what happened, and there were so many people responsible, from Panamanians to Americans to even a superior force of the religious figure. So this man has a blue eye and a brown eye. The brown eyes being the Panamanian, and the blue eye being the American side to it. And he's sort of looking out here, sort of letting things happen the way they did. Well, this guy is somebody who I met in one of my camping trips, and I went into the jungle with some friends, and we walked for a whole day in these little paths that you find inside the jungle. What we wanted to do was sort of go and discover the origins, the beginnings of the river Chagres, and we went through a part that's called Cerro Azul. And you sort of go up there in your car and you leave it and you walk into the jungle. It's all sort of downhill because you're up high on that where you leave off, where you start, and you walk and walk down the mountains and the hills, and you go past many rivers. And then we came to a clearing where there was this thatched roof house, and this guy came out, a very young person, 16, and it was kind of late during the day, and he said, stay here, you know, don't go any further, because here you have a place where you can camp. So we camped there and became closer to the guy, and he sort of gained confidence with us, and then started bringing out his poems, which he was obviously very proud of, and it was a very big part of his life. And he started reading them, and I was very impressed with the quality of the poetry. For somebody who lives in the mountain and has had very little cultural contact, you know, with the outside world. And but apparently this kid did do some reading and got hold of some books and knew a little bit, and his poetry was all about sort of loves that he never knew but had a sensibility towards, and so he wrote about him, and he's a passionate lover of romance, and so he would write about these loves that he had and that left him, and these loves that that he would go to dance and fall in love and then dream about the girl for the rest of his life. And so when I came back, I got a model and started working on him, and all of a sudden I felt like I wanted to tell this guy's story from the mountains. And then I added on to the painting. I did the person, and I did him with his poems, his papers, and his pencil, and holding this woman that is one of his fantasies, one of his women that he has written about, that is very nurturing to him, and so it's very much alive to him. It's very much a real person to him, yet she's sort of floating into him, and she's not a real character, she's a figment of his imagination. And they're both standing on a bed, sort of like the sexual connotation to what he's doing, and then there are more women coming from, you can see from the upper part of the painting, sort of in a haze form, coming into his life. These are other poems that he's written, other loves that he's sort of experienced through his poetry. He became kind of important, somebody that, it wasn't just that encounter. During that trip, I dislocated my shoulder in one of the rivers, and I couldn't put it back into place, and so he helped me out. He was with us, and he said, this was after we had left our camp there where his house was, and we had walked a few hours into the jungle further, and he dislocated my shoulder, and he said, okay, I know the quickest way back to where your car is. So he helped me, and as you know, a dislocated shoulder is really painful, and we had to walk over 5 hours, and he was helping me, and he really did a lot, because I was almost leaning on him, on top of him. He did a lot of physical effort. And so we stayed in contact after that, and then he came into town, and he had more contact with people here, and he now is publishing his first book of poetry. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and he's gotten involved with the university, with people there, and he's really coming along, and he's good. I think he's going to be one of Panama's top poets.
Is this going to be available like in Grand Morrison or something like that, or is it University Press?
Well, it's University Press, but they put it to sale in the bookstores.
And what was his name?
Alexander Sanchez. Well, this part of the city is probably the one that I like the most to spend time in. I like the provincial feeling you get here. The people, there's a lot more people, and they're simpler people, and they're people that are very warm, and they're always there. It's a combination of emotion and necessity, because this is a very dense area. There's a lot of people here per square acre, and these people live all inside a room that's not very big, and so their social interaction, a lot of it is done out in the street, because they get a lot more space there. So if you come here at night or anytime during the day, you see a lot of people all over the place, and and you have contact with them, and you get to meet them, and you see them every day. I used to live in a part of town where it was, I would say, close to this density, but no, not really. But it was dense, a lot of high rises, and I lived in the 7th floor, and I had a neighbor upstairs, a neighbor downstairs, a neighbor next to me, and I never saw them. I mean, you see them once a month in the elevator. Here, you see them every day, and I like that sort of contact. I like their simplicity, and I like the fact that it's not a super sterile environment. There's color here. It's not probably as clean as you would find somewhere else, but I like that. I like, things a little more basic. And then there's the charm of the old part of town where you have the older architecture, the history. It's a lot of cultural background to this area. The artistic community here is not very tight-knit. I think younger artists tend to stay more together because of school, university. They hang out together more. They see each other more. As they get older, they sort of split into their own world.
There was a rumor that the University of Panama was going to put together a fine arts department.
There is one.
How recent is that?
It's 3 years old now.
And
I taught there for a year.
Really?
Last year, and it's coming along, but it's very poor in the sense that it doesn't have much money or much space, and they do get drawing class, anatomy class, painting class, and history of art, and they don't. I was very impressed when I went there. The brushes were they were all eaten up. They didn't have palettes. They couldn't afford canvases. They couldn't afford paint. So the professors would bring in and give them paint, give them, brushes. I would take them my old brushes that were good for them. That the school isn't yet structured well enough, in my view, for them to really develop fully as artists. But it's happening. It's the first step, and it's a good effort, and it's mainly an effort of one artist here in Panama.
Would that be
Dutari.
Oh, Dutari?
Mm-hmm.
Alberto
Dutari.
Got one of his serigraphs.
He's a very bright person, and he's put together this school out of his own effort, and he's stuck there, and he's gotten people to participate in it, and he's doing a very, very big effort in it. Pero estas son...
Explícamelo, cuéntame.
Ese es un personaje que todo esto es de oro, ¿no? Oro alrededor, entonces tiene como un icono que son de los cuadros religiosos.
¿Ese cuadro no tiene nada?
No.